To check our GTV library, of course, for some of the charts you just saw there. That is on GTV Go on the Bloomberg terminal. All right, well, the U.S. and China are reviving long-stalled trade talks, but when the clock strikes midnight here on the East Coast, fresh tariffs on $16 billion of each other's goods will then take effect. Let's look at the implications of this with former Export-Import Bank Chair Fred Hochberg. Fred, good to see you here in the studio. We've got pluses, we've got minuses happening even this week. Hochberg Cohen and David Malpass talking this week, but then the tariffs on $16 billion and then the commentary period, $200 billion. Give us your 30,000-foot assessment of where all this is right now.
Well, let's start with the talks. The talks are not very high level, so I think the talks are probably generating to create a conversation for further talks. So I think we should not expect a lot out of those talks. The $200 billion of additional tariffs are being considered by the United States Trade Representative. I understand there are over 370 testimonies.
Right.
These are from individual companies, trade association, large companies, small farmers, all testifying in front of USTR, hoping for an exemption on the $200 billion. And that could go into effect as early as September 6th. So a lot is riding right now in what used to be the doldrums of August, but it is not the doldrums of August.
Anything but that right now. All right, with all of these concerns during this commentary period, it still seems that the prevailing sentiment is that it's falling on deaf ears. The big question that I want to know is, what is the end game that could be achieved by no response from the White House here?
Well, I think that's the problem here. You know, tariffs, if they bring someone to the table and get their attention, that's a good thing. The problems we have is China is not going to abandon China 2025. And on intellectual property and tech transfer, those are harder things to simply mandate by law or by edict, even in China. So the outcomes, if we simply want to have less of a deficit, that's not as hard to achieve, and tariffs sort of can do that. But finding more long-term solutions is going to be much more difficult, and I would say, Remy, more difficult by ourselves.
We're just going to jump in, Fred, for a moment. We've got some earnings crossing the Bloomberg. Alumina reporting first half adjusted net profit of $305.8 million. Interim dividend per share being declared at 8.6 cents there. That's almost double, or more than double, I should say, of 4.2 cents year on year as expected. First half net income at $286.4 million. Fred, sorry for jumping in there, but let's continue the conversation in terms of there's a sentiment out there that both sides will need to hurt a lot more before you get any sort of progress. Have we reached that point yet? And do you see these discussions and then potentially a Xi-Trump summit later on as being enough of, I guess, a circuit breaker or a ramp to step down from a potential loss of faith for both Xi and Trump?
Well, right now it appears from what I've been able to discern, American farmers, American supporters of President Trump are with him. They know that we've got to, they say, well, we're going to have to just go up with a little bit of pain for a longer-term gain. And I think they still see President Trump as fighting for them and fighting from a level playing field. How long their patience will last, we don't know. But actually, I would say it's a testament to Americans that they have a sense of patience. They are looking for the greater good. But at some point, the president will have to deliver. One pinch point will be when farmers come January need to secure loans for the next growing season. And if the tariffs are in place and they've had a bad season this year, it's going to be much harder for those farmers, a lot of them in red states, to get the bank financing. And that's when they may lose their patience.
In terms of the political turmoil that we've covered at length, it's been a pretty difficult week for the president. What are the chances, do you think, or the risks that is going to force an even stronger approach by him when it comes to dealing with Beijing as he tries to reassert some dominance going into the midterms?
Well, I think one thing is difficult. It is hard to fight so many battles simultaneously. China, NAFTA, the EU, those are a lot of balls to keep in the air, even assuming President Trump had no other issues to deal with. So in some ways, I think he needs to have at least one enemy, but I don't know that having three foreign adversaries at the moment is really going to be serving his purposes.
Fred, the topic of currency manipulation comes up every single day, it seems. Usually it has to do with China, but today apparently it has to do with the United States. Wall Street observers, some of them say that Donald Trump could use the currency and try to devalue it, try to weaken it here. What are your thoughts on that?
First of all, currency manipulation is difficult to prove and difficult to pull off. It is not something we have done as a country, though there are critics from abroad who felt quantitative easing was a form of currency devaluation manipulation. You know, a strong dollar is still good for the country, even though it may not be the best thing for exports, but the benefits of a strong dollar and being the world's reserve currency go far beyond just the impact on exports at any one moment.
All right, and very quickly before we let you go, got to talk about NAFTA. We did see some developments, or at least some positivity with Mexico. Canada still waiting in the wings here. How confident are you that, one, Mexico will happen, but two, I think the bigger question is if Canada can actually be drawn back in?
It appears from what I've been able to learn, I think that that is looking better right now, that we'll have some agreement on NAFTA, partly because I think it's going to be hard to be fighting China and NAFTA, Mexico, Canada, and the EU all at once, and that's sort of low-hanging fruit. China is a much more politically salient adversary to have for President Trump. So my hunch is we may see some progress on NAFTA, and that may be helped by the disagreements we're having with China.
All right, trying to corral the friends, I suppose, before some of the competitors out there. All right, thanks very much. Fred Hochberg, former Export-Import Bank Chair. All right, up next, coming up for you, Malcolm Turnbull can expect another attack on his leadership. We'll look at the increasing turbulence in Australian politics. This is Bloomberg.